These diaries are amazing. You weren't allowed to keep a diary because if the enemy captured you, they felt they might learn something. This is in the middle of February, 1944. It rained and snowed all last night. I woke up to find our gun area a sea of mud and water. This is a very tough break for the guys. The poor gunners, standing ankle deep in mud and water all night. A night none of us shall forget. My name is Jack, and Jack Rhind, R-H-I-N-D, Rhind. Anyway, it's a Scottish name, but yeah, what, do you want to say how old I am? I mean, that's a secret. I was born on May the 1st, 1920. I was at university when the war broke out, and pretty soon at university they started the Canadian COTC, the Canadian Officers Training, and you could volunteer to go into that. You could go into the infantry, the artillery, or the signal corps, or engineers, and I chose, because a friend of mine was going in the artillery, to go in the artillery. We were about 3 months training there. The first month was in all arms, not just artillery, just training to be a soldier, including military things like marching and all that drill and all that sort of thing. And then after 1 month of that all arms, we went into the specialty of artillery training. Now, artillery, you have to learn, there's an awful lot of mathematics. You have to learn how to calculate the line, the range, the angle of sight. You're given a map reference, and you have to then figure from the map reference and know where your guns are and where the target is. And you have to, so that when you're firing, because you can't always see, you don't usually see the target. At the beginning of the war, they didn't have this gun. It's called a gun howitzer. It's a combination of many artillery pieces. You could tilt it up because it had a split trail. It was a marvelous new gun that was so, the Army was so excited to have this new 25-pounder. It was just created as I was starting my training. On January the 1st, we got on a train to leave Ottawa, and we knew we were finally going to go overseas and do more training in England and so on. So we got on this train, and we ended up not in Halifax, where we thought. We ended up in New York harbor. And we got on, and we were put on a boat that was a mess. It was a Belgian, an old Belgian Congo boat that wasn't meant for trans-ocean work. We were about a few days out, maybe 6 or 7 days or 8 days out, when the most terrific hurricane. We were in a convoy where we were protected, and of course there were German submarines trying to sink us. But when this hurricane hit us, we woke up the next morning. We were sitting all alone in the middle of the ocean. There wasn't a boat in sight. The captain said it was, who'd been at sea for many years, said it was the worst storm he'd ever been in. And after 23 days, we landed in Liverpool, and we were ever glad to get off that ship. Churchill and Roosevelt and the others decided we'd go in to Europe through the soft underbelly of Europe, which was Italy. They thought it would be easy to go up Italy, and we could attack the Germans and join the Russians there. Well, Italy didn't turn out to be anything like us off. It was the most perfect country to defend. Down the middle of Italy run the Apennine Mountains, and and Italy isn't that wide a country, and off each side ran rivers. And of course, if you were trying to cross a river on the attack, the enemy, the Germans, could wreck all the bridges, destroy it, and sit on the other side and watch you trying to cross a river without no bridges. Each gun had a gun pit we dug, and then we put sandbags around it because it protect you from the shells. Occasionally a shell would land right in the pit, and some of my guys got killed or badly wounded that way. And then I would dig my own command post. I had a command post that you would dig a big trench where I had my instruments and my communication. Sometimes you could say that's when I was most scared, because of the whole, you'd get in there and there'd be snakes and rats and all kinds of insects and stuff get in this darn place. And also, when you were alone, you know, even though you were being shelled by the enemy, if you were busy commanding your guns and your men and busy calculating, you were occupied. But when you were alone, and there were shells landing, and you were down in yours trying to sleep in this hole, you could hear the shells coming, boom, so you could duck. But the Germans, just about that stage of the war, invented a gun called the 88, which the speed of the shell was faster than the speed of sound. And so if you heard it was too late, because the shell, the gun, the explosive had already got there, and that was really something. We had agreed that Rome, both sides, we didn't bomb or shell or fight in Rome. So Rome was an untouched city. It was just like peacetime. You went to Rome, all the clubs were open, everything was just like going into a peacetime city. So, and I had some time in Rome. I had a leave. A leave is when you have a little holiday out of action. And while I was there, I decided I'm not a particularly devoted religious, but I wanted to go and see the Vatican. And so I went to the cathedral, and it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful building and church inside. And there was a little door in the corner. I went in this, and there was a room in there, and nobody in it. And then in walked somebody, and my God, it was the Pope. And the Pope saw me standing there in uniform, and he came over and put his hand on my head, and he blessed me. And that's how I survived the rest of the war. And that's how I've been so lucky, in my life. We then moved over to join the troops trying to get through Monte Cassino. We were the first Canadian regiment there. I put my 4 guns at the foot of Monte Cassino. We dug our gun pits. I dug my command post with my men, and officer or not, I did my digging because you wanted to get that done fast. They'd be shelling you. We were there for 7 weeks. 7 weeks we sat there. Every time we fired, they could see us, and at night they could see the flashes. So they were landing shells on our gun position a lot. Suddenly the silence is shattered by a deafening roar, and the sky is lit up by the flashes of hundreds and hundreds of artillery pieces of all sizes. The pandemonium is indescribable. The valley is lit up like daylight, and the air is filled with the swish and the whine of shells. Sometime after midnight, Jerry starts to toss them over at us. At 02-300 hours, he lands a direct hit inside number 2 gun pit. But by an amazing stroke of luck, no casualties, because the gunners at that particular moment were taking a break. I was up FOOing, forward observation officer, with the infantry, and I was talking to the senior officer, the colonel of the infantry, who had this body of men that were going to advance at 5 a.m. the next morning. And he wanted some artillery protection. Well, I only had 4 guns, but I got the whole regiment, which was 24 guns, and I drew up a line of fire so that the infantry are there, and my line of fire was in advance of them to keep the German heads down. So I drew up this plan, all the calculations, and the regiment back there, here was Rhind commanding the whole regiment. They had to bring up extra ammunition for this. It was a big deal. And then the moment came at 5, or was it 5, just dawn, when the infantry officers said, go, and then I had to say fire. And so I could hear our shells zooming overhead and within about, 30 seconds or so, the word came back from the infantry, stop that artillery fire, it's landing on our own men. Now that's the worst thing that can happen to an artillery officer. And I had to stop, and I couldn't change. You can't suddenly say change all the guns, the angle or something. It wouldn't work. And I had to stop after all this. And had I made a mistake, it was the worst disgrace, I thought, of my life. And so I went back to the regiment thinking I was, going to be really in trouble. Well, they treated me all right. And then we found out that the infantry had made a mistake, and they had moved their start line 400 yards too far forward, and that's how they got in the mess. Anyway, that was one of the worst moments of my time. My wife and I, about 20 years after the war, and you remember Cassino was where we had been for 7 weeks. When I had last seen it, it was just a mess of mud and shell holes and broken trees and the houses all ruined. It was just awful. And but I had kept my war map, and I knew exactly where our gun position was. So I hired a driver, and my wife and I drove, and I knew we were in the right spot. No, this isn't the spot, because it was, the birds were singing, the trees, the fields were green, and everything was just beautiful. It was summer, and I said, no, this. And so there was a young man, a farmer in the field, and I said to him in what Italian I had learned, Durante Guerra, and he said, oh, sì, io ero ragazzo, I was a boy. And this is, yes, but I couldn't believe it. Where were our gun pits? No sign. So he said, andiamo, come down to the end of the field. And there was where we had our battery command post, was dug into the side of a bank and had been untouched. And there were a few shell holes. And immediately my God, this is it. When we left, I stopped and I looked back at the field and at how beautiful, and I thought of how awful it had been. But this is the way it's supposed to look, and how awful war is, how just terrible, this is ruined. Do we really have to do this? Well, there wasn't really any readjustment. I came home, and luckily there's a picture of me in the newspaper leading a troop of men along King Street. But out of the crowd came a man, Major Davies, who had been our training officer at University OTC. And he said, if you want to come and work for me, come and work. And so that was the tipping point in my life, because that's where I went to work. And that's where I met my wonderful wife, and that's where I ended up as president. I went back to live with my family over here in Rosedale, and had this good job. And you read about big adjustments and people committing suicide, and gee whiz, thanks to the Pope, everything worked out great for me.